This episode of the Real Sales Manager podcast features a really interesting discussion with Mark Petty, where in addition to some reflections on what it is to be a sales manager, we focus on teamwork and what sales managers can do to promote teamwork, both within the sales team and also across the whole organisation. Mark's got some great experience. He started in sales as an inside sales rep, but quickly moved into frontline field sales in the IT and telecom space. In our discussions, he'll tell you how he first moved into sales management. He started managing a new business customer acquisition team at Nextera One, an IT and communication services company. Following their acquisition by Dimension Data, Mark held several roles heading teams in commercial sales, business development, managed services, and ending up as Director of Commercial Sales. For the last 7 years, he's driven sales at Littlefish, a multi-award-winning managed IT services provider. Firstly, he was Sales and Marketing Director, and then as Chief Growth Officer. He joined as employee number 80, where they had a £6 million revenues, but helped transform the business into a 650 strong, £50 million plus revenue organisation with world-class service centres across the UK. I've put a link to Mark's LinkedIn profile in the show notes. After this spectacular success, Mark very recently decided to take a 12-month career break to recharge his batteries and consider some new challenges. Our conversation was wide-ranging. I enjoyed it immensely, especially his comments about how sales management is about people, the importance of hiring the right people, generating the right values, including integrity, consistency, building trust, collaboration, the importance of excellent communication skills, and obviously teamwork. Mark comes out with some great quotes, such as, "People don't leave organizations, they leave their manager." And a new one to me, comparing a great sales team to a tug-of-war team, which apparently is all about getting the right people in the right place, then all striving together in a rhythm. You can see the parallels with sales management. Following the main conversation, as a bonus, Mark describes how he would handle a particular difficult situation, one involving a good salesperson resigning to go to a competitor for better money. Enjoy. So, Mark, it's great to see you again. Thanks ever so much for agreeing to be a guest on the podcast. So we're going to discuss sales management in general, and then in particular, I'd really appreciate some of your insights, particularly around teamwork, which many people tell me is one of your great strengths. But if we can we just start with, I always start with asking you to tell us a little bit about, your journey, why you went into sales management in the first place.
Yes, so Steve, delighted to be on. Thanks for inviting me in. And yeah, teamwork is a thing that I pride myself of. My journey in very short steps is sort of graduate to boardroom in about 11 years, working in the communications and technology sector. And I did about 5-6 years as a salesperson, so going from internal telemarketing through to account exec, account management. And our sales director at the time decided to take a sabbatical. He left, came back as the chief executive of the business, and we had lost our sales manager for the team. We had two teams in essence within the business, one looking after customers, one looking after new business, which was the team I was in. And they were struggling to recruit externally. And a couple of my teammates proactively approached the CEO and said, "Why don't we give Mark the job? We all respect him. We know he's good at what he does." And so they offered me the role and I took it.
Okay, okay. So it sounds almost as though you fell into it rather than it was a big plan to get there.
100% fell into it. Was given the opportunity. Um, at the time, really money oriented. That's why I was in sales. And so they offered me
Okay.
a significant uplift on my base salary. And I thought, well, I'll just give it a go and give it a try. There's no guarantees because I now know with the experience I have that the best salespeople don't necessarily make the best sales managers. But I've done
Yeah.
really well as a sales leader ever since. So it was the right thing for me at the time.
So yeah, I often get that, and I totally agree. The best salespeople don't always make the best sales managers. But from your perspective, to be a successful sales manager, do you think you have to have had that grounding in sales? I mean, yourself starting as an internal sales rep and building up, is that useful, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very difficult to just go straight into sales leadership if, say, you've been some other sort of leader in either another department or another business. I think you do need to understand sales
Yeah.
process, you do need to understand sales methodologies, and you do need to be exposed to selling as a job. So I think you definitely do need those things, in my opinion, in order to then go on and be a successful sales manager.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've worked with some pre-sales people who've moved into moved into management and then over to sales, and it can work, but it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were almost pushed into it, but looking back now, so what would you say are the main characteristics or attributes of somebody to be successful as a first line sales manager? Other people saw it in you, but what would you say were the key attributes that you would look for in somebody?
So I think there's lots of personality traits. So I think that's important. So
Yeah,
you can't be a shrinking violet, in my personal opinion. So you do need somebody who has good levels of confidence. You're looking for clear, capability as an individual. So you need somebody that's
yeah,
been performant. I don't think you can hand on heart take somebody who's been underperforming into a sales management role. You need somebody who's got a track record and understands how important it is
yeah,
to perform. Um, I think
yeah,
articulation is always good. You need people who can represent themselves, the team they're looking after, to the wider business, whether that's different teams, departments, or up into the echelons of the board of directors. Um,
yeah,
and I think you need somebody who is prepared to put in the effort because it is a significant amount of effort to step up from sales to sales leadership and take on the extra
yeah,
responsibility.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of it is mindset. I mean,
Yeah,
you need that track record,
yeah,
but then confidence, being able to put in the effort.
yeah, 100%.
Okay, interesting. So, what did you do? I mean, I see there's lots of books behind you. You're obviously
Yeah,
well read,
yeah.
but you were pushed into, not pushed in, but you were invited into this sales management role. How did you develop yourself? What were the key things for you to focus on over those first 6 or 12 months?
So I think first and foremost, I sought out the opinion and the knowledge of the other sales managers in the business. Not just, sorry,
Okay.
other managers in the business, not just sales managers. So other managers
Okay.
inside the organisation, friends of mine that I'd built relationships with over time. So understanding from them what good looks like, um, understanding their key metrics for how they measure their teams and what's worked well for them. But I was
Yeah.
also fortunate enough to have salespeople in my family, sales leaders in my family. So I was able to approach them and understand what they did in different businesses to the business that I was in. But I think from a self development perspective, I wanted to be certain I had all the skills. So I'd done lots of work around communication because I knew communication was terribly important. And I felt
Yeah.
that from a communication perspective, if you can speak publicly, if you can present with authority, then you should be able to communicate with the people around you, whether that's what you want from them, what the business wants from you as a collective. So I really focused in on communication and making sure that I was able to communicate at all levels with good, strong vocabulary. And that was a real trait of mine
Right.
that has continued with me into my wider career.
That's interesting. We often talk about for sales managers kind of being in the middle of the sandwich. As a
Yeah,
sales guy, you or a salesperson, you look at after your customers. You maybe make sure that your account team is working well. But as a sales manager, you have to communicate upwards. You're out to colleagues. You represent the team.
yeah,
Plus, you're out in front of customers as well.
yeah.
So it's a different view and a different type of communication.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And I think to add to that, then is probably motivation. So, I've always led teams in sporting scenarios. So, being school captain, being team captain from a football team, then going to university and captain in the university side. I actually started when I first got into the management team, running my team in that almost sporting scenario. So, motivation was a key part for me. So I like to understand what motivated the individuals that I was working with, and I'd utilize that information and knowledge to my benefit in order to help lead them better. So I was big on
yeah.
motivation, so I would use quotes at every start of every sales meeting. I'd have a new quote. I would show them snippets of
Okay.
videos at the start of years to get them motivated to go into a new financial year. So communication, but motivation for me are very close set.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, when we talk a bit more about teamwork, one of the things that always interests me is when I ask sales leaders, what kind of a sales team are you looking for? And using a sporting analogy, is it like a rowing eight where everybody's doing exactly the same thing in unison? Or is it more like a soccer team where people have specialist positions? Or is it more like like a golf, the Ryder Cup team, where people do their own thing, but it's the team is just there to support them.
Yeah.
What's a sales team like for you? Is it how would you describe a sales
Um,
team?
from a sporting analogy, I would probably say tug of war because if you take tug of
Okay.
war as a sport, and I don't know if you've seen there's a TV on program that's done the rounds, which the name of it escaped me recently, but they showed the importance of rhythm of the team to be successful in a tug of war. So you need to make
Oh,
sure, a
okay.
bit like you do in sales in general, that you've got the right people in the right positions. So it's exactly the same in
Yeah.
a tug of war. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you put the different types of people in the right positions to give you the greatest chance of a successful outcome. And the biggest of those is the rhythm of the team working together. And we'll come on and talk about teamwork, I'm sure, and that's a big part of it for me. It's not about the
Yeah.
individuals within, it's how you work together to achieve the outcome that then benefits the individual and the collective. So, as a sport, I would use that tug of war analogy, I think.
Oh, okay. Mark, that's the first time I've had anybody talk about tug of war.
Oh, well, there you
But yeah, I
go.
think that makes sense. No, thank you for that. You said you learned a lot from family members who are in sales leadership positions in other industries. Um, do you, I mean, from them, did you gather that sales management as a profession has some particular traits and skills and knowledge of its own? Or is it very different in different industries, do you think?
No, I think there are lots of similarities. Whether you're talking about behaviours, whether you're talking about characteristics. I believe it's irrespective of the industry that you're in, the sales management, irrespective of industry, has very similar traits and contributions that will allow sales managers to be successful. And I think that's the nice thing, actually.
Yeah.
I think I could have you could argue I have. So I started out selling, you know, cables, cabling, and very basic switching infrastructure. I'm now in my career
Yeah.
where I'm selling complex, multi-million pound outsourced services. So whilst it's all within the IT field, I've been able to transfer
Yeah.
my sales leadership skills into very nuanced parts of that industry. And if I wanted to have done, I'm very, very confident I could have taken my sales management, sales leadership skill sets and gone and worked in the retail vertical, or gone and worked in a manufacturing vertical. I have absolutely no doubt about that.
Okay, so it's not sector specific. I mean, obviously, knowledge of customer
Of course,
is vital.
yeah,
Yeah, but having those basic sales management skills are transferable.
yeah, 100%.
Um, okay, so you were clearly trying to develop yourself when you moved into sales management.
Yeah.
What were the biggest challenges you found over the first year or two?
I think coming back to the sporting analogy, and if you go into modern football, where managers don't get much time and they tend to get moved on, especially in certain clubs. Um, as the manager, you go in and you inherit a team of people. So I think the
Yeah,
first challenge and the biggest challenge I had was I'd work with my team of people that were teammates. I was now the leader of that team, and I didn't believe I had all of the right people necessary in that team in order for me to be successful as a sales manager and for us to contribute to the levels of success that the business needed. So
yeah,
I had to work very quickly to um, put around me the people that I needed to be successful. And that meant a very quick birth, a baptism of fire in essence, of people management. So performance management,
yeah,
people management, exit management, which is very uncomfortable for lots of new leaders. It's uncomfortable as a process because you're dealing with people and people's livelihoods. But I learned that
yeah.
very early on, which stood me in great stead for the rest of my career. So that was my initial and biggest challenge, exiting the wrong people and bringing in the right people. And I know that's going to sound harsh, but that's the reality, especially 25 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, no, okay, I understand that. That's very difficult, particularly if, as you say, you were managing people who were teammates,
Yeah,
a few weeks previous.
yeah,
And it's one of the things. I mean, I talk to aspiring sales managers about that because the skill, but there's also you have to have, you know, good values yourself to do it
exactly.
properly, and to be able to see it through.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think one one question that I often get asked is, particularly when you're promoted from within the team, one day your teammates, can you still be kind of one of the team when you're the manager? How does that work in your experience?
100% for me, and you have to be. I think
Okay.
of all the teams that I've led, if you went back and interviewed any of those people, they would talk about the relationships that we built. They talk about the trust that we built. They talk about, I've built friendships within the teams that I've worked. And I've recently just
Yeah.
left a business and had some wonderful communication from them, letters, cards, etc. And people talked about how I was able to be a friend, but also be the boss at the same time and do that seamlessly. And I think that is something I'm really, really proud of because you have to be one of the team. Um, and if
Yeah.
you do that very, very well, you will have even greater success.
Yeah. I mean, clearly people will treat you differently when
Yes.
you are the boss.
Yeah.
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 And it's very difficult to get that both be seen as a friend, but
Yeah.
also as the boss, particularly if you're having to, let some people go, change the dynamics of the team. That's an amazing thing to have done, but emotionally difficult for you as well, I guess.
Yeah. I think I know I'm strong in emotional intelligence. I've done lots of tests that tell me I'm
Yeah.
strong, but I don't need a test to
Yeah.
tell me that.
Yeah.
I'm a very people-oriented individual. I've known that for a very long time in my life. And it is that
Yeah.
treat people how you want to be treated. Just because you have to exit people, it doesn't mean you have to be obnoxious, rude, cold. You be professional, but you be polite, you be pleasant. You try and find the positives.
Yeah.
Help them with what the next stage of their career might look like. Make
Yeah. Yeah.
really certain that they know why they're in this position and what they could have done differently. And hopefully in their next phase of the career, they're grateful for the way you've had that conversation. Not everybody does in that way, but that's something that I'd certainly encourage.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I've had people thank me for letting them go because most people
Likewise.
know deep down if it's not a right fit.
Yeah,
But it's yeah, and sometimes they need that to help them.
100%.
Um, uh, so an interesting question. You may not want to answer this. What
Okay.
was the biggest mistake What was the biggest mistake you made in the first year or two,
Um,
and what did you learn from it?
the biggest mistake. Uh, that's a really good question, Steve. The biggest mistake that I made was probably focusing too much on the team rather than remembering that I'm actually representing the business and the management team. And you've got to be able to manage
Okay.
both downline and upline still. And I was probably far too biased to my teammates, which as a
Okay.
non-shareholder at the time, as a PAYE, you don't care too much, if I'm being frank, or I didn't care at least enough.
Yeah.
And then when you realise that actually you've got to do both, you've got to represent the business interest first and
Yeah.
foremost, and then that of the team, then that is obviously something that I learned during the first few months and years. Valuable lesson, especially as I
Yeah.
later went on to become a shareholder and part owner in businesses. Um, I'd already honed that skill by the time I got to that point.
Yeah. I see lots of people, I probably myself as well to a certain extent, in that initial period. Yeah, because you've been one of the team,
Yeah,
you focus on that team.
yeah,
But it's and it's one of the things around teamwork. It strikes me that when you become a first line manager, you're managing this team, but you're also part of a management team, whether
exactly.
that's an exec team or the sales management team.
Yeah.
So you've almost got a kind of dual nationality. It sounds as though that was something that you became aware of over time.
Yeah, definitely. I think you recognise it really quickly, especially when you've got, for example, target setting. So you've got a team of people who nobody wants a target increase. They want salary increases, but they don't want target increases. They don't want to have to
Yeah,
do more to earn the same amounts of money. But then you've got the business who have growth targets, and therefore, in order to deliver on those growth targets, you have to um, disseminate a target and distribute a target to people. So you've got that balance in just that one single example where you've got the pull from the business or the push from the business and the pull from the team. And you have to try and make that work.
yeah, yeah, and and it's difficult, isn't it? Particularly when in a negotiation, as with a customer, you can't divulge all the information,
No,
um, and so you are in that that bit of the sandwich,
yeah,
trying to be a good member of each team.
exactly.
Uh, okay. Can we just talk a bit more about teamwork?
Yeah,
Because as I say, a number of people have mentioned to me, yeah, it is one of your great strengths. So how do you? I'm, the question I came up with is how do you, as a sales manager, build trust in the team? So I'm kind of assuming that you would agree that trust is key if you're going to have some teamwork.
yeah,
But how do you build that, particularly when you have to let people go, you're setting
yeah.
targets, all that kind of stuff. How do you do that?
I think it's multifaceted, to be honest, and I think it starts in the interview process. So for me, I'm looking for integrity with the people that I'm interviewing. And you have to
Yeah,
continue that on with the successful candidates. And you as a leader have to be integrous. So I think that's really important to build trust from both sides. And one of the things I actually do in the interview process to try and gain whether, because all trust is built on relationship. And so I have to determine whether I can have a relationship with these people. And within the first 20 minutes, I look to see if I can invite them into my home to meet my family, my wife, my two children, and have a summer barbecue
okay,
with the rest of the people around me. Um, and if I
right.
determine that that is the case and they are capable of doing that, then we'll move on through the rest of the interview. And unfortunately, if it's not, I do tend to cut the interview short. So I think it starts in that interview process, looking for integrity, looking for the right type of individual um, before you even get into to building trust on a daily basis. I think you have to be consistent as a leader. If you're
Yeah.
inconsistent, if they are uncertain as to what you're going to do, how you're going to react in a given scenario, I don't think you can build trust. So consistency is really, really important. I think you have to. I'd like to think that I am somebody who leads from the front. So I'm not one of those.
Okay.
You will have seen those caricatures of Roman times where you've got the guy at the back on the chariot, sort of whipping the people in
Yeah.
front of him and shouting instruction, or then you've got the guy at the front who's sort of pulling a rope, helping the people behind him, and sort of taking them in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'm the guy at the front, right? So I'm the guy who's leading from the front. I'm not the person shouting at the back. And I think the team need to see that. So my opinion is you have to get engaged. And something that I've sort of prided myself on through my sales leadership career is I would never ask anything of the team around me that I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. Um, but
Right.
it's
Yeah.
not just about having that as a mentality, Steve. It's about demonstrating that on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, and that could be from
Yeah.
you know working with them on presentations to deliver to clients, helping deliver the presentations. It could be staying late in the evening or working at a weekend when necessary. I don't advocate weekend working at all, but sometimes when
Hmm.
it is necessary, I don't just want my team to see that it's them in the trenches. We're working together as a
Yeah.
team. So I think that's really important. I think being
Yeah.
supportive, and that comes in many different ways. So being supportive could be, you asked me a question earlier. What mistake did I make? Or give an
Yeah.
example of a mistake I made in my early career. That's human nature. You make mistakes,
Yeah.
and of course there's right and wrong, and there's extremities of mistake. So if it's the type of mistake that is going to lead to gross misconduct, it don't matter how supportive you are, you can't avoid the obvious. But
Yeah.
providing you're living by the right and wrong, you can still be supportive of people who've made a mistake, and I think that hugely drives trust levels up between two individuals. So I'm supportive, but clearly being really clear with them as to what the right is, what the wrong is, and how not to make that mistake again. Um,
Okay.
I think a big thing for me with building trust is supplementing people's weaknesses, because you will have lots of different strengths with the different characters in your team. And I think a good
Hmm.
sales leader will find a way to understand those strengths, expose the strengths, and then utilize those strengths and supplement the weakness rather than trying to fill a gap that's never going to be fillable, or moving them out of the business because there's a gap. Supplement the weakness. If
Yeah.
you've got somebody who is, you've got two colleagues maybe, one is superb at telemarketing, the other is superb at presenting, team them up together and let them learn from each other, supplement the weakness. I think that's really important for me in building trust, because people get to see that, okay, he recognizes I have a weakness and he's working with me to overcome
Yeah.
it. And that really
Yeah.
adheres you to people for the long term, not just the short term. And I think another thing
Yes.
for me is the social aspect of working is really important. You're going to be spending 40 to 60 hours a week with these people typically, albeit in
Yeah.
different lengths of time, depending on who's working on what. So social aspect is really important in getting to know somebody and build trust. And I think historically, 25 years ago, certainly when I was coming through, that would have involved probably going for a drink, but it doesn't have to be alcohol based today. There's so much more to do, whether that's getting outside and improving well-being, going on walks, maybe taking in Snowdon, or getting together for a barbecue with spouses and families. And I think that's another really
Yeah.
important part of building trust, is getting to know people, getting to meet their families when you can. Maybe that's just their spouse, maybe it's their children as well. Because when they meet your family and you meet their family and there's a connection there, however small, trust can go through the roof at that point. And I'm a big advocate of that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's amazing. On in Real Sales Manager, we talk about interviewing and recruiting salespeople. But your first point there about, I think some people call it the Sunday lunch test.
Yeah,
Yeah, would I be happy to have Sunday lunch with these people?
yeah,
Um, and it sounds like you look at that from the first moment,
yeah,
but then as you're building, it's that group of people that you're happy to spend time together,
yeah,
which is something we often forget,
yeah,
because we get tied up in have they got these competencies and skills and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's about people and relationships.
You can have the most competent people in the world, Steve, for me, but if there isn't that
Yeah.
conduit and camaraderie, there can be more disruption, which affects performance rather than encourages it.
Yeah, it's also what I'm drawing out from what you said there, Mark, was for me an interesting point around, particularly when we're talking about making mistakes, and we all make mistakes, but there's a difference. What I took from what you said, there's a difference in terms of, I configured it wrong, or the presentation had the slides in the wrong order, or whatever it is,
Yeah,
versus a mistake based on values,
yeah,
not
yeah.
telling the truth,
Oh,
not being open with
absolutely.
the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like you see quite a big difference in those two
Oh, yeah,
respects.
very different. Yeah, very different. And I'm talking about the former rather than the latter. I think values-based
Yeah,
mistakes, can be very difficult to come back from. Um, and especially if it is fabrication of the truth. And again, I talked about extremities. You can't have that because you can't have trust if people are blatantly lying. And then you've also got the
yeah,
ripple effect of what that fabrication of truth has caused that you've got to go and clean up as well. Harder externally than it is internally, but harder irrespective.
yeah. Interesting. How do you regard? So clearly, you build very strong sales teams that you're leading.
Yeah,
Um, how do you acknowledge the fact that particularly today, particularly in more complex businesses, it's a team across the business. There's pre-sales, there's customer experience people, there's a whole host of people involved in a successful relationship with a customer. Um, do you see as the sales manager part of the responsibility to help build those teams? How does that work in your experience?
yeah, 100%, Steve. I think it's your salespeople, in my opinion, are really only as good, arguably, as the pre-sales people that they work with, because you're dealing with subject matter experts now, and their contribution to the
Yeah,
outcome is critical. So I encourage a number of things. I encourage my sales teams to build close relationships with other departments, whether that's the leadership in the department, but more often than not, the other people in their department, the subject matter
yeah,
experts, whether that's in pre-sales or it could be post-sales operations, it could be finance. In the modern day sale, you're touching so many different departments. I think 25 years ago, you probably would have only touched the finance department to get some numbers signed off. Now they're an integral part alongside legal to creating the most successful outcome. So for me as a leader, it's about how do I lead beyond authority, because I don't have the
yeah,
authority as their leaders. So again, I think it comes
yeah,
down to how you treat the individual, how you make those individuals feel when they work with you. It's about treating them the same way you would your sales team, by building trust, by being consistent, by setting expectations. What are our expectations of their behavior, their contribution, their
yeah,
performance? And you feed back in the same way you would feed back to a sales team. I mean, again, because communication has always been something I've really worked hard on, I enjoy coaching people. I think I'm a natural coach, and I have no problem in sitting down after a customer presentation or a customer meeting and calling maybe a pre-sales engineer aside or an operational individual aside and say, look, and you manage them, even though you don't have the authority, by feeding back what went well, what you'd maybe like to see some improvements on. Clearly, if it's something hugely detrimental, you'd probably have that conversation with them, and then, of course, have that conversation
yeah,
upline. But it is about that leading beyond authority, building, multi-team cohesion, and then also celebrating the success with those people when that success comes. Don't omit them from whether it's a celebratory meal or an internal communication announcing the win. They've been as big a part as anybody, so make sure they're getting the recognition
Yeah,
they
yeah,
deserve.
yeah. That's really interesting. And again, in my experience, a lot of sales managers, particularly when people are new to the role, yeah, it's difficult enough managing your team. But yeah, the fact that this managing beyond authority, doing the coaching with, for example, the pre-sales people, but to be able to do that and have it accepted, you must have built a position and relationships ahead of time so that people accept it and hopefully even relish it.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it started for me when I was a salesman. So as a salesperson, you work with the pre-sales team, and we would come out, whether it's a short coffee in the the road chef down the road, or whether it's back at base, the next couple of days, and you're having a meeting about the next steps. I would always have the
yeah,
conversation to and fro, and I would also encourage feedback from myself, especially in the early days when I'm a naive salesperson, or when I was a very naive sales manager. I would encourage feedback. How did I do? What would you expect me
yeah,
to have done better? How could I have done better? Other things that I probably shouldn't have
yeah,
done. But equally, I would give that the other way around. So if you've practiced that at your peer level, you then just carry it on to the next peer level. So when you become sales management,
yeah.
you carry it on, and that gives you then the relationships to then have that beyond authority conversation with people who, for paying rations, don't report directly to you.
Yeah, that's great. This whole concept of coaching, for me, it has to permeate everything. It's not something you do in a conference room for
No,
half an hour.
no.
It's that, as you say, we're both showing our experience talking about what is it, the road chef.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, we talk
yeah,
about coffee shop coaching
yeah,
in
yeah,
Starbucks or wherever.
yeah,
It's that 5 minutes,
yeah,
and just doing that constantly with everybody.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
100%.
okay, brilliant. So Mark, if you were to try and summarize it, and you had to give two or three pieces of advice for, somebody trying to get into or just starting out on their sales management journey, what would be the top pieces of advice from you?
I would say, first and foremost, work heavily on your communication. Be able to communicate uh, with your team, be able to communicate with your peers, and be articulate enough and have a good enough vocabulary to articulate the points up into that management team you become part of, and maybe even a greater leadership
Yeah,
team. So I think communication is fundamental. I think be personable. You have to be more personable in the modern sales era than you ever had to in the last decades, because you have to now more um, understand individuals and respond and treat individuals as well as a team. So I think being personable is really important. Um, and then I think
yeah,
finally is interview very carefully, know with clarity what you're looking to bring into the business. Make sure you're asking the
yeah,
right questions, and make sure that the references match what you believe you've seen in the interview. So I think communication, being personable, and interview really strongly, really methodically would be my three takeaways, I think.
yeah. Yeah, getting those right people in the right place.
Yeah,
I'm fascinated by, you said be personable, and I see that all the time. But the paradox is that we're more data driven.
yeah,
There's so much of what we do is electronic
yeah.
these days. But but even in this new environment, the ability to be authentic, to be
Oh,
yourself, to build relationships is becoming more and more important.
100%, 100%. People. I remember a common um, uh, connection of ours, Perry Fawcett. He would always say to me, "Mark, people don't leave the business; they leave their manager." And I loved that, and that's really stuck with me from sort of 2006, seven, for almost 20 years now. And that's why I think even more so than ever, especially with so much working from home, being personable is important, and making sure if you are having a very strong remote working policy, you bring people together face to face
Yeah.
regularly.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are learning that the hard way.
Yeah.
I love that quote. Perry, by the way, is hopefully going to be a future guest on the podcast.
Excellent.
But I'll pinch that quote ahead of that.
Yeah.
People don't leave the business; they leave their manager.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
Okay, been great talking to you, Mark. Best of luck. I know you're in a short career break now, but I'm sure you'll be back helping people, building teams in the future, and I hope refreshed from it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Mark. So as a bonus in the podcast, we ask you to think about a particular situation that somebody else has told us has been really difficult. So the situation I'm going to give to you is one of your salesperson has handed in a resignation letter. She's saying that she loves working for you, but she's been offered lots of money to go and work for one of your key competitors. Now, you believe she's underpaid at the moment because, only a couple of years ago she was a junior. She's risen through the ranks very quickly. But as is often the case, her base salary, a package, is not caught up with her capabilities. You know that if you have to replace her, you're going to have to offer somebody a much bigger base than she's on. However, if you suddenly, because of a resignation, just go and increase her package, doesn't that set some difficult precedents? So what would you do in this kind of situation? Hey, have you experienced this?
Yeah, I mean, I've never witnessed it. I've been that situation. I was in the same company for 17 years, albeit through different guises through acquisition. And I started off as a graduate and eventually was a board member. So I've lived and breathed the exact scenario.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing I would say, Steve, is the empathy I have for people who do come through the ranks. And then it's down to the integrity of the leadership team, the reliance on HR for looking at talent, but also the culture of the business, because some cultures will take advantage and they will know that they're getting a deal, shall we say, by having a low cost, exceptionally talented salesperson, the lady in question in this case, and they'll let that just hang there until this scenario arises. So if we speak specifically about this scenario, I think first and foremost, I would like to think that I am close enough to the person in question that you sort of see this coming, or at least you would have a conversation before they found themselves going out to recruitment consultants. The challenge we've got today, in the same way as IT salespeople, we're trying to reach out to CIOs and they are so closed down, recruitment consultants are always looking for sales staff to move on, for other businesses to become better. So they're always going to get approaches. That's just the nature of the beast. We do as leadership, sales leadership people in our positions. So I think first and foremost, as a sales leader, you should be close enough to the people to understand their scenario, understand their personal lives, understand how that looks for them from an earning perspective. I think you would always have the conversation with people about, and certainly as a young salesperson, maybe even as a young sales manager, or a new sales manager, you don't have to be young, you can just be new to the job. You can forget sometimes that people need more than probably you would expect them to need, and they want to focus on the basic salary because it gives it a bit of glamour and something to talk about with friends. But the focus for me should always be brought back to total earnings. How can you make sure they're as successful as possible? What are you delivering for them as individuals? What training are you contributing? What level of subject matter expertise? So it's important that the people who are asking the question about more money recognise that it's much more than just about the base salary. That doesn't mean to say that that base salary isn't too low. Now, that's when the HR thing comes in. If you've got a strong HR department, there should be some talent mapping. You should be picking out the stars in the organisation. And your description sounds like
Yeah.
this lady's a star. So you should be already having some progression planning, and certainly around remuneration, and looking to increase the contribution we're giving to her based on the contribution and the value she's bringing to the business. So hopefully you can be proactive about these things. If none of that's happening, if you don't know your people well enough, if you don't understand what's happening in their private lives, if you don't have a strong HR team, and this scenario just happens to fall on your feet, I think if you are clearly with evidence that she is a top contributor, that you have got all of the upheaval that comes with losing good people, so the reflection of that on the customer base, with her customer base, the reflection amongst your peers that you're losing good people, it's very, very difficult if you don't have evidence. But if you have the evidence, I think I would go straight to my upline leadership team and put down a supportive argument as to why we should keep this lady and give her not necessarily what she's asking for, but you give her an uplift on the salary that she's experiencing today, and then you communicate equally with her about what the offer is you're making, why you're making it, and how you're going to ensure that she can achieve her goals by staying with you and the organisation rather than having to start fresh somewhere else. That's a bit long-winded, Steve, but hopefully I got my point.
No, but there's a lot of good stuff in there, Mark. I'm going to try and summarise it. I mean, in some ways, you're saying it should never get to this position.
100%.
That you should have had talent mapping in place so you'd spot it. You should have the relationship in place so that she can have a quiet word with you and say, "I'm thinking about." But it's criminal in my mind to lose good, talented people just because of base salary.
No.
It could happen for some reason. Somebody could, I know very early in my career, somebody doubled my salary.
Yeah.
And I was tempted.
But
there was other things involved as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, so,
and I've used it. I've been that person. I don't mind saying I've had a new sales director and a member, and I said to him, "Look, and I had an approach from a different company, and said they're offering me £15,000 more. He wasn't prepared to offer that, but he was prepared to offer me 10. And I didn't want to leave, but I certainly wanted more money. But as I said, back then I was more focused on the aesthetics of a higher basic salary, when really I should have just focused on how can I maximise my overall remuneration.
I love the way, if this was sales training, the way you reframe the objection away from base salary to total earnings and total career earnings.
Absolutely.
But Mark, thanks for that. I'm asking a couple of people the same question, and what we get is hopefully lots of different perspectives on an issue which is, I think, typical of many of the people management issues that we face, because it brings out lots of the other stuff that you discuss. So thanks a lot for that.
No, definitely, no problem.
If you are an aspiring or new sales manager in complex business to business, or you know of somebody who is, you may want to go to www.realsalesmanager.com. That's realsalesmanager, all one word.com, to learn about our unique blend of training and coaching to help become as effective as possible, as quickly as possible.